Congressman Adam Schiff is a Democrat of California. He sits on the January 6th committee. He was the lead impeachment manager during the first impeachment of Donald Trump. And Congressman, let me start just on that. Like, what are we to believe? What are we to understand from the evidence your committee has introduced about what Donald Trump's plan was to do when he led the armed mob into the halls of the U.S. Capitol?
Well, it was to succeed where he had failed through every other means, and that was to stop the transfer of power, to overturn the election, to cling to his office. And, Chris, I think you put your finger on what was most important, in my view, in the testimony yesterday, and that is that when the president was told this crowd was armed, they wouldn't go through the magnetometers because if they did, they would have their weapons taken away. The president's response wasn't good. We don't want them to have weapons. The president's response was take the magnetometers down. He wanted them to be able to march with him to the Capitol armed. And so his knowledge, his intent, I think we got the most direct view of that in the testimony yesterday. The fact that when that attack was going on, having been frustrated in his efforts to accompany this armed mob, he's sitting in the safety of the White House. He's asked over and over to do something about it, but he won't do anything about it because he thinks that Pence deserves this. That's a pretty telling, compelling narrative provided by this witness of a president who, when all else failed, was prepared to use this violent mob to achieve his ends.
We got some news about Pat Cipollone, which I'm going to ask you about in a second, but just one more follow-up on that, which is whether you have updated your understanding, whether your mental model of what happened that day has changed or evolved as you and the committee have learned more and more.
Yes, and, you know, I certainly suspected that Trump was aware of the fact that the crowd was armed and dangerous, and, you know, there was evidence to indicate that. But her testimony was the first that he was directly told about this, and his response was take away the method of disarming these people, take away the magnetometers. And, you know, to me, that tells the whole story of where he was coming from on that day and what he was prepared to do. So, yes, I think our understanding continues to improve. And it's an astounding thing, Chris. We're a year and a half from these events. And up until yesterday, the public wasn't aware that the president knew the crowd, the mob was armed, and he wanted them to be able to march on the Capitol armed. You imagine how the Capitol Police, who were injured, over 140 of them, during that attack, knowing that the commander-in-chief, who is supposed to be protecting them and our institutions, wanted that mob to be able to go to the Capitol armed. It really is astounding.
I mentioned former White House counsel Pat Cipollone. The committee has made direct appeals to him on screen before the mics to come talk to them. I understand he had an off-the-record, I think, conversation with the committee and his deputy. There's a subpoena out for him today. Why now? Why is Pat Cipollone being subpoenaed?
Well, as we've learned more and more, we've learned of his role in the run-up to January 6th, on January 6th, his fear that there was going to be blood on the hands of the White House chief of staff if he didn't do something, that if the president accompanied this mob to the Capitol, they would be charged with every crime on the books or something along those lines. So his knowledge of the propensity for violence that day, his knowledge that the president and others may be breaking the law that day, I think is very important, and he ought to show just a small portion of the courage that Cassidy Hutchinson displayed. Here she is at the ripe old age of 26 years old, showing such poise and character and courage. And here he is in a much more senior position and able to testify as to what he knows, and to do so observing whatever legitimate claim He might make a privilege, and plainly there are lots of conversations and evidence he can provide that have no claim of privilege. Here he is, and he needs to come out of hiding. He needs to do his patriotic duty.
Final question for you. It's been a very weird aftermath to Cassidy Hutchins' testimony insofar as various people have attempted to dispute details of her testimony, often either anonymously or through spokespeople issuing statements. Some of these people have testified before your committee, some have not. There's obviously a profound asymmetry between an individual who testifies under penalty of perjury and sworn testimony and someone anonymously saying something to someone. What do you make of those efforts? Do you have concerns about the veracity of what we heard yesterday?
No, I have great confidence in Cassidy Hutchinson as a very, very credible, reliable witness. She told us what she knew. She told us the extent of what she knew. She told us when she didn't know things. You know, I spent almost 6 years as a prosecutor. I dealt with a lot of witnesses. And sometimes you can tell the most about the credibility by what they tell you they can't tell you. That is, that they don't know. And you know, all you can ask from them is to tell you the truth, to tell you, you know, when they were a first-hand observer and when they got something secondhand. And she did all that. And some of these attacks on her, some anonymous, you know, sleazy rumor campaigns, all the rest of that is by people that don't have the same courage that she does, that don't have the same respect for their oath of office. You know, the idea that Mark Meadows, for example, would dispute anything she has to say in hiding from the committee, unwilling to come forward, willing to write about these things in a book when he's not, of course, under oath, is just appalling. So I have nothing but respect for her and nothing but confidence in what she had to say.
I'm surprised that Meadows was able to tear himself away from scrolling through his phone to even hear her testimony, to be honest. Congressman Adam Schiff, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.